Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. I'm Connor Hibbett. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at the Michigan Wolverines. And joining us on the channel today to give us more insight on the 2025 Wolverines is Clayton Safey. Clayton, welcome to the channel.
Glad to be here. Nothing better than talking ball in May.
That's right. I love talking college football year round, and our viewers love hearing about college football year round. And so we love to give them that great content. And that's why we have great people to give us great insight, like Clayton and like he will today with the Michigan Wolverines. Well, before we get into the position group breakdowns here, Clayton, please tell our viewers where they can find your awesome content.
Yeah, I'd say just head to the Wolverine.com, easiest way, and got a bunch of content up there from not just me, but our entire team: Michigan football, basketball, recruiting, NIL, transfer portal. It is, as you said, a year-round endeavor with all the ins and outs of college football and Michigan football and all the other sports too.
Well, looking into the roster for the 2025 season, I think the quarterback room has gotten discussed just a little bit here in the offseason. So what is the outlook here? Who are the most likely like start? I don't know if you can quite say if there's a solidified starter at the moment, but who do you think could separate themselves? Whether it's at the beginning of fall camp or is it going to maybe it'll be like a 4 or 5 week process into the season?
I think it's going to take itself into fall camp, and they'll name a starter probably in the back half of fall camp, maybe on game week at the latest. They did that last year. I think it was, they didn't name a starter. They just trotted one out in the first game, but they decided internally around midweek that week. I think it'll be a little bit earlier this time. I think somebody will separate as long as all the options are healthy. And that's one of the things they dealt with a year ago where not everyone was healthy at the same time. So I think the odds on favorite right now is freshman Bryce Underwood, the number one overall recruit in the country. In part because Mikey Keene, the grad transfer they brought in from Fresno State, was banged up in the spring. He missed all of spring. Now he's played over 2,000 snaps in college. It's not a huge deal that he missed that time. He has familiarity with Chip Lindsey, the new offensive coordinator. He played for him at UCF in 2022. But at the same time, that could have been a big 15 practices for Keene to get acclimated and get comfortable. So I think Bryce Underwood took that and ran with it. He joined the team back in December, went through bowl practices, went through winter conditioning, went through spring ball, and I mean, the physical tools are there, the upside's there, the size is there, the durability potentially, and he's a dual threat athlete at 6'4", 208. So I just think he checks every box. Now it's going to be an adjustment. It's going to be tough for him, maybe to be at his best right away. But the best way to grow might be to just throw him into the fire and let him go. And if he is that, just incredible talent that we've seen him be at the high school level, then I think he's got a chance to get himself real comfortable by midseason.
So Underwood trouts out onto the field against New Mexico, and you're sitting on your couch or you're there in person at the game, and whether it's a Michigan fan who's a diehard and hopes to see his ceiling immediately, or whether it's a wait and see kind of approach here, what do you think the expectation is for Underwood that first game of the season against New Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Michigan should have more talent across the board than New Mexico. So I think that that's a decent opportunity for him to get comfortable. I mean, the spring game, he looked like things weren't moving too fast. He looked like he was comfortable back there, to use that word again. But it's different when it's live action, when you're not playing against half of your own team, right? When the stands are full. So they're going to have to go to Oklahoma in week 2. So, it's going to happen quick, but that's a game for him to get under his belt, get that experience. I would expect some tantalizing plays, him to show off his athleticism, his big arm, his great talent that he has. I've been high on him for a long time. I saw him as a freshman in high school at Belleville, and to see him grow and win state championships, he's done it all at the high school level. So I think that game one will be a good opportunity for him to showcase that skill set, get a couple mistakes out of the way. Nothing's going to be perfect, but show you can manage a game, manage the team, lead the offense.
And in regards to the receivers he's going to be throwing it to this year, so Donovan McCulley transfers in from Indiana, Anthony Simpson's another transfer. Frederick Moore returns. Uh, Ultimately, what is the outlook for the Michigan receiving core in 2025? Do you think there's going to be an alpha here, or do you think it's going to be more so by committee?
By all accounts, if there's an alpha, it's Donovan McCulley, who transferred in, like you said, from Indiana, converted quarterback, who actually started a game at Michigan at quarterback back in 2021. And he was asked this spring, what do you remember from that game? He said, I remember Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo coming after me back then. But he transitioned to wide receiver. He actually threw a touchdown pass on a trick play at wide receiver against Michigan at the Big House in 2023. And did show a lot that year down the stretch. I think averaged close to 100 yards a game, had several touchdowns. And then in 2024, new coaching staff at Indiana with Kurt Signetti brought a couple transfers over and kind of got lost in the shuffle, due in part to an injury early in the year, left the team to preserve his red shirt, and is here at Michigan. And, you do hear that he is definitely the leader in the pack right now at wide receiver. I would bet heavily on him having the most wide receiver targets on the team this coming year. At the same time, is that because he's just much better than what Michigan has, or is he going to establish himself as a legitimate, really good top 10, top 15 receiver in the Big Ten, which of course there are 18 teams now, so that wouldn't be all too bad if he could do that. Samaj Morgan is back as a slot receiver, looking to prove that he's more than just a guy that catches bubbles and is used on jet sweeps, but he's proven throughout his career that he can do those things at a high level, maybe expand his game. Frederick Moore had a pretty big game with a touchdown catch in the bowl game against Alabama. He is somebody who could take the next step, much bigger now at up to 191 pounds. Looks like he's had that man year of growth, as Jim Harbaugh used to talk about, that every kid has. And he's got some talent coming out of St. Louis. And then there's a whole slew of guys. Like, they have a lot of numbers at the wide receiver spot, a bunch of guys who have shown flashes throughout their career but haven't done a ton. Overall, this group has a ton to prove after a really disappointing season last year. They didn't have the quarterback play that you would like for a wide receiver group to be able to have, but they still didn't live up to their end of the bargain either. So they got a lot to show. But worth mentioning, a few freshmen could be in the mix here. Andrew Marsh, that they really like a lot, 6 foot, 170 pounds. And then the one that got a lot of buzz this spring was Jamar Browder, who's 6'5", a big target, can go up and get the football. Michigan wanted to add some size at wide receiver this offseason. They did that with some of those acquisitions. McCulley also stands 6'5", so Underwood may have some bigger targets with good hands to work with there.
What's the ceiling for the pass catchers this year? Do you think it's significantly higher than what it was in 2024?
I think so, and part of it is the quarterback play, right? No matter how you slice it, it's going to improve. I don't know how it could get much worse. You had kind of a revolving door. You had 3 games with Alex Orji starting, and he really couldn't throw the football effectively at all. To put it mildly. So I think some more stability there, as long as Bryce Underwood stays healthy, and or Mikey Keene, it plays pretty well back there. I think that they have better upside. You lose Colston Loveland at the tight end position, but you have some talent there to help serve as a safety valve for quarterback. And a young quarterback's best friend could be, the check down, right? At times when you need somebody reliable that can make a short pass to, that can get some yardage. And Marlon Klein can do that. Hogan Hansen can do that. Showed some flashes last year. So, there's some optimism, but a lot of it does have to do, I think, with the quarterback play. It's going to take a step up, no matter what, because it was they were behind some service academies in passing yards per game last year, which is crazy to say at a place like Michigan.
So you mentioned stability, which is great to have. And speaking of stability, continuity, the offensive line at least returns significant more experience than what they had at this time going into last season. I think they lost. Was it all 5 starters from 2023 going into last year? They also lost a few of their better depth pieces behind those guys. So like I said, there's more continuity back on the offensive line for this fall. Is this a group you think that can take multiple steps forward this fall?
That's a huge question. And, not to bring everything back with the offense to quarterback play, but it is so notable. And you got to protect a young quarterback who's trying to get some confidence, especially early in the year. The offensive line has to come ready to play at the beginning of this season. They can't wait to gel throughout the year. They've got to figure it out in fall camp. And they're working to do that this offseason, talking about cohesiveness, building better relationships. And you're right. They lost their top 6 offensive linemen from 2023 last season. They had a ton to replace. And now they lose arguably their 2 best offensive linemen from last year on a line that really disappointed. Miles Hinton was a draft pick to the Eagles. Josh Preeb, an undrafted free agent to the Miami Dolphins. So, but you do have some returning starters back. You have Giovanni Alhadi, who has moved from right guard to left guard, where he spent most of his career as a backup behind Trevor Keegan, then moved over to right guard last year because Preeb came in from Northwestern. Greg Crippen, second year as a starter at center. The right guard spot is fairly open right now. Nathan Afobe comes out of spring as my projected starter there, but they could shift some pieces around, move somebody in from tackle. Andrew Sprague at right tackle played in the bowl game as a true freshman, started there, and the coaching staff loves him. So I think he's cemented, at least for now, as a starter there. The left tackle battle is the one everyone's kind of looking at. Evan Link struggled mightily last year at right tackle, started at left tackle in the bowl game because Miles Hinton opted out. They wanted to get Sprague some time at right tackle and did a little bit better, but still, a concern there. They brought in a transfer, Brady Norton from Cal Poly, who's a little bit undersized at 6'3", but really impressed at the FCS level last year. So, Lawrence Hattar is a transfer they're bringing in, D2 out of Ferris State, won a national title there, who could compete at guard. But it's hard to have great depth on offensive lines in across college football right now with the landscape because guys can play somewhere else, and the transfer portal is right there for anybody who gets promised a starting spot somewhere else or feels comfortable at a different institution. So the depth and the level of competition for some of these position battles is probably lacking. It's not what it was in 2021, 22, and 23, but the hope is they can take a big step.
So looking in the running back room, Justice Haynes transfers in from Alabama. He averaged nearly 6 yards per carry last year for the Crimson Tide. I take it he's running back 1 here.
I wouldn't be so sure about that. I think Jordan
Okay.
Marshall, who's entering his sophomore season, is right there. I think they're going to be 1A and 1B and split carries pretty evenly. Now, I think running back is probably the position on the football field that's as hard to predict in terms of roles before a year as any other because, you give a guy some carries, he does something with them. You can directly see everyone knows how effective a guy is, and it's pretty obvious who should be out there, how the rotation should go typically. So, again, it's hard to predict, right? One of those two could easily take the job and run with it. Of course, injury is always a possibility as well, so it could shift throughout the season. But Jordan Marshall rushed for 100 yards in that Alabama game, and 100 yards is good. It's nothing crazy, but every single one of those yards was hard fought. There wasn't a ton of room to run and work with there, and he made the most of them. By the end of it, his jersey was just completely dirty, and he looked like a warrior out there. So he earned a lot of respect in that game. Spent most of his freshman year banged up, but got healthy. And once Mullings was hurt in the bowl game, Donovan Edwards didn't play. He got his opportunity to shine. But Haynes was a big pickup. Michigan fans saw him in the Rose Bowl a couple years ago, dart for a couple nice runs in that game. They brought in a couple transfers this spring at running back as well because you need depth there. But those two make up probably one of the better running back duos in the Big Ten.
So besides Bryce Underwood, who's another player on the offense that if Michigan were to have a great breakthrough season, let's say they have a double digit win season, who would be another guy that you're looking at and say and would think if he has a great season, then Michigan will have a great season besides Bryce Underwood?
It, whoever starts at left tackle, I think, it is huge. And Evan Link is a guy that people are looking at, maybe the leader in the clubhouse right now, but it's going to be a battle in fall camp. Brady Norton, as I mentioned earlier, coming from Cal Poly, he's going to be in the mix there. And then Andrew Babalola, 5-star freshman who came in early this spring. Sharon Moore said that he's going to be in the mix to start as well. So, and then, if Norton loses a battle or Link doesn't end up being the starter there, then they could move to right guard potentially, and it would shift there. But I think it all starts with the offensive line, and then the other guy I would pinpoint is just Donovan McCulley, who we talked about earlier. If he has a go-to, if Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene has a go-to alpha wide receiver who's reliable on third down, who's reliable in those big moments, who's reliable when there is pressure, and they're on the same page when they escape the pocket and then make some of those plays, kind of like a Roman Wilson to JJ McCarthy a couple years ago, then this offense can be pretty solid, I think.
Looking over to the defensive side of the football, Michigan will start up front. They lose obviously a couple of their best defensive linemen to the NFL draft. Is there still just as high of an expectation on the defensive line for the Wolverines this season?
I think that expectation internally doesn't change. I mean, I think we look at what Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham did in big moments like against Ohio State or just throughout their careers, the talents that they were underrated as recruits. They come in, they're impressive from the jump. I mean, Jim Harbaugh called them gifts from the football gods, and that was before any of us had seen them in game. And then Mason Graham right away showed it. Kenneth Grant maybe took him a year, but then becomes a breakout star, and next thing you know, he's getting a sack in the national championship game as a sophomore, and then has an outstanding year to become the number 13 overall pick in the draft this past season. So there's going to be a drop off at D tackle. I think that they are much more confident though about the depth they have there, the ability to roll through a bunch of fresh bodies. Rayshon Benny, who's coming back for his fifth year senior season, is slept on nationally. He is somebody who backed up Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Mozzie Smith, all these first and second round picks throughout his career, but still made plays in limited opportunity. Now, last year he had a bigger role, missed a little bit of time with injury, but he's very good, very quick feet for somebody his size at 6'4", 300 pounds. So look for him to be an all Big Ten player. And then the two transfers they brought in on the interior, Trey Williams from Clemson and Damon Payne from Alabama, kind of were in that Rayshon Benny role the last couple of years at their former schools. Maybe the third guy or fourth guy in a defensive tackle rotation that is still a valuable player. Trey Williams had 2 sacks in the college football playoff game against Texas last year. Like, still a big role, but not quite a starter. They come in, and then they're looking for big jumps out of Trey Pierce in his junior season, Eno Etta in his junior season, and then Ike Wuna coming back for his fifth-year senior season had an opportunity to earn a role last year. And so I think that the interior of the line can be solid. Now, where they're probably need to be better than solid is, if they're going to have a great D-line, is the edge rusher spot. Derek Moore, back for his fourth year, 7.5 career sacks, had 4 last season. Actually, 11 career sacks, sorry. 4 last season. 2 of them came in the bowl game, but had the same amount of pressures as Josiah Stewart. He still gets to the quarterback. Stewart went number 90 in the draft last year. TJ Guy, 5.5 sacks last season as a backup, entering a starting role this year. So I think that he's got to be a big time guy on this edge rusher group. And then Cam Brandt and Dominic Nichols will be kind of the depth guys at edge rusher, but a little long winded because there are so many names that I think are going to cycle through. And maybe that speaks to the kind of depth they feel like they have at that position.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of freshmen that are going to be stepping up into bigger roles this year for the Wolverines in the defensive end room. Nate Marshall, of course, Travis Moten is more of a tackle, and then we have a redshirt freshman. I don't want to try to pronounce his last name. I'll let you take that one. I think you know the guy I'm talking about here. Uh,
Lugard Edekpai, I believe.
yeah, yeah.
I hope I'm saying it right. Yeah.
Um, you,
Yeah. I
you,
mean,
you, you did better than I would have there, so good job there. Yeah, but yeah, so this is a pretty deep room though.
it is. And Dominic Nichols is a redshirt freshman who I mentioned who's in the 2 deep and somebody who the staff really liked throughout last season. They just had some guys in front of him. So he got his opportunity in the bowl game, played double-digit snaps, forced a fumble. He can, just a big-time personality, a fun guy, seems like really fiery. That is going to be a fan favorite, I think, once they get a chance. The fans get a chance to get to know him a little bit better. But Lugard, man, he's like 6'7", 240 or something like that without pulling it up. Don't have it in front of me, but he's almost
Yep.
built like a wide receiver who's just raw and really athletic. And it was fun watching him move around in the spring game. Probably a little bit of time to go for him to develop, but he could, potentially be someone down the line to watch for. Devin Baxter, his classmate, redshirt freshman, same thing. And like you said, Nate Marshall comes in this summer, big time athlete. Got hurt in his basketball season this past year, so we'll see where he's at physically. But top 50 kid who they're really excited about. They were able to flip him back late from Auburn. He was committed to Michigan, flipped to Auburn. They flipped him back late in November, back from Auburn. So that was a big win on the recruiting trail.
In the linebacker room, it looks like Michigan returns their top two tacklers from last year. They also have some experienced guys behind them. Is this potentially the strength of the defense going into the year?
And I think so. And part of replacing your defensive tackles, right, is not just inserting other defensive tackles and expecting them to be Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant. You kind of have to pick up the slack elsewhere. And, a defense isn't going to be the same every year. Sometimes your strength is going to be the two in the middle, and then the linebackers need some time to grow. And that was the case last year. I think Ernest Hausman and Jay Sean Barham got much, much, much better throughout the season. Hausman especially made some big time strides, kind of became a leader of that defense, wearing the green dot, getting the communication from the sideline. Having a guy in that position going into another year as a starter is really big. And then Jay Sean Barham, they love his athleticism at 6'3", 250. He's just massive and really fast, plays with a nasty edge to him, but has gotten better at playing within the confines of the defense. So I think look for a big jump from that position group. And Jimmy Rolder, who's a senior, dealt with injury throughout his career, actually a redshirt junior. So he'll have a couple years here to be a really prominent force in that linebacker room. And then Cole Sullivan, probably the breakout candidate here, redshirt. Actually a sophomore, burned his red shirt last year, ranked 6th on the team in special team snaps. Only took 14 snaps on defense, but he's taken a big step this offseason to where they say they trust him as much as anybody out there. So truly building some depth there. They bring in Georgia transfer Troy Bowles, son of Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles. Didn't do a ton outside of special teams at Georgia, but and was injured this past spring, but they like his upside for the future. And then Nathaniel Owusu Boateng, 4-star, who came in this spring and missed his senior season with injury, but was able to get healthy, go through some spring ball this year and move around. And they talk about the explosiveness with him. So Brian Jean Mary, the position coach, has done a really good job recruiting lately after a little bit of a lull recruiting at that spot for Michigan a couple cycles before that, and building the depth. And they feel really good about the short and long-term future of this linebacker room.
What's the outlook for the Wolverines secondary in 2025? Is this a group of strength, or are there still some new faces having to work in here? There's a couple guys coming in from the portal. Is this a group that they have a lot of confidence in?
The thing that gives you confidence and optimism is what they did at the end of last season, even when Will Johnson was out with an injury. Zeke Berry was a nickel for years. And then when Will Johnson gets hurt, he's still one of their best guys. They had to move him to outside corner, and he did a really good job there. So you're looking at him to probably stay outside. Now, if someone else emerges as a starter and it's better for him to move back to the slot, he'll do that. But you have him, you have Jair Hill, who's entering his redshirt sophomore year, who probably, is a guy that, if you ask me the same question you did for the offense in terms of like who needs to step up if this offense or if this defense is really good, it's probably Jair Hill. Can he become steady, consistent, reliable, down to down, game to game, series to series? So a lot riding on his development. They have a freshman, Shamari Earls, who, Ron Bellamy, the wide receivers coach this spring, was asked about the D-backs and unsolicited brought up a true freshman in Shamari Earls, who is already, has the size, physicality at 6'2", 203. I think he could play right away, be in that rotation. So I think corner, the jury's out a little bit. Nickel, they're rotating a bunch of guys in there. Maybe will be different game to game, which is a little bit of a different approach than we've seen from them recently. It was Dax Hill in 2021. It was Mikey Sanders still for 2 years. And then last season, it was Zeke Berry until they had to pivot a little bit after Will Johnson's injury. So we might see a few guys in the mix there. Tevis Metcalf, his brother TJ Metcalf, both came in from Arkansas this offseason. Mason Curtis at 6'5" safety, who's been taking snaps there. Brandon Hillman at safety, a huge, big hitter, just loves to hit and is really fun to watch. Has emerged probably a starter at high safety. And then Rod Moore, everyone's seeing how healthy he's going to get, or how quickly he's going to get 100% healthy. Didn't run for 14 months after tearing his ACL last March, but is working his way back. So you hope he's back for the beginning of the season, because he's not just a leader, a returning captain. He's an absolute game changer when he's healthy. Game sealing pick against Ohio State a couple years ago is just again, a game changing, a difference maker that maybe they don't have those difference makers on this defense, but if he's healthy, he is one of them.
Overall, looking at the 2025 Michigan Wolverines, what is a position group that you think needs to stay healthy?
Probably corner, just because of what we just mentioned with the um, maybe lack of proven depth there. I mean, quarterback is an obvious one as well. There's not really a lot of quarterbacks on this roster, but um, if you're talking offense there, and then I got to mention, I don't know if we're going to get to it, but Dominic Zavada at kicker is just an absolute weapon. 7 kicks last year, 50 plus that he made, and has the number one field goal percentage in Michigan history for any kicker, and that's a weapon. You get past the 40, and you start to feel pretty okay about the prospect of scoring points.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up a kicker. I was a kicker in high school, so I love it when the
Okay,
kickers get their respect.
absolutely, people love him around here. Yeah,
I bet. I mean, yeah. Whenever you have like just a dude that's as a kicker, I mean, whether Iowa had like with their punters in back years, or yeah, now
yep,
here in Ann Arbor, I mean, it's just really fun to watch really high quality special teams because a lot of teams like they kind of are what they are. There's nothing special, no pun intended about it. But with Michigan, they do live up to being special in their special teams department. So it's
they
nice
do.
to see. It's refreshing.
They take pride in it. I think they probably have longer and more practice periods of special teams than a lot of teams around the country. So it's not by accident, right? And they've had a long line, not just Jake Moody to James Turner to Dominic Zavada, a long line of kickers throughout decades that have been really good at Michigan, have made clutch kicks at Michigan, and have gone on to have success in the NFL. And Zavada, he could have gone last year. He probably would have been picked at the end of the draft, but decided to come back and prove himself more. And he wasn't even a Lou Groza finalist last year, so that is motivating him, and I think he'll be in contention for that award this year.
Overall, what do you think should be the expectation for Michigan in 2025?
The expectation used to be you beat Ohio State and you win the Big Ten. I think now winning the Big Ten isn't as important. Beating Ohio State is. That's certainly the goal, and making the college football playoff, whether that's with the auto bid from winning the Big Ten, or whether it's, hey, you go to the Big Ten championship game, lose that game like Penn State did last season, and get an actually more favorable draw than Big Ten champion Oregon did. Ohio State finished 4th in the Big Ten standings last year and wins the national championship. So if you can get in, you have a chance. If you can get in, you're a good team that at least won some big games, right? You proved yourself. You played really good football throughout the season, and you're going to give yourself an opportunity to make a run. So to me, the expectation is to be on the verge of making the 12-team college football playoff this year. There's some pressure on Sharon Moore after winning only 7 regular season games last year, but I will say that pressure is a little bit lessened because of what they did in the big games last season, namely Ohio State on the road in Columbus, winning there for just the second time since 2000. So he's bought himself a little bit of goodwill, and now they have a good shot to get back in the mix for the playoff this year.
Well, Clayton, really good job previewing the Michigan Wolverines on our channel. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do this. And again, really good job. And one last time for our viewers, can you please tell them where they can find your content?
Yeah, well, first of all, appreciate you having me on. This has been it's been fun, just kind of running down all of it, and helps me get it in my head here as we get closer to the season. I think we're almost 100 days away, but yeah, just thewolverine.com. We're on the On3 network. Check us out over there. Content flowing daily on Michigan football, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal, NIL. It never stops. But Connor, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.